Hey, welcome back to System Foundations. Today we're going to look at file and directory operations. And before we do that, we're going to create 3 virtual machines that we can use for this operation. Now, all 3 of these are actually going to be regular machines. So it's going to be a Linux machine, a FreeBSD machine, and a Windows machine. I'll go ahead and create the Linux and FreeBSD machine in this video, and maybe we'll go ahead and create a Windows machine as well, so that you can see how we go about that. So let's look at those really fast. We'll do a FreeBSD 12.2. The name will be UNX Web 01. It'll have 1 CPU, 4 gig of RAM, and 48 gigs of a dynamically allocated disk. That means it will not take up 48 gig on your hard drive, but it'll be 48 gig maximum size. So when you initially build it, it'll only be like 600 or maybe a gig. Next, we'll create a Linux Mint 20.1, which will be LNX Web 01. That's Linux Web 01. Have the same thing, 1 CPU, 48 gig of RAM, and a 48 gig dynamic disk. And then the last one we're going to create is a Windows 2003 server, which will be WinWeb 01. Have 1 CPU, 4 gig of RAM, and a 48 gig dynamic disk. So let's go ahead and get started with that. We're going to go ahead and open up Oracle VM VirtualBox. And we're going to, let's see if we can pull this off. Click. There we go. And we're going to show how we build these machines. So first of all, we're going to click New. And the first one is Unix Web. So UNX Web 01. Now, I'm not going to bore you with this and walk through the entire process with each of these, but I'll just do the very initial portion, and then I'll walk through the install very quickly. So this is going to be a BSD box, FreeBSD 64-bit right there. And over here, memory size, we're going to say is 40. Now, if you don't have this memory size right here, look down here in guided mode. If you select guided mode, it's going to look a little bit different. So it's going to have step by step. I'm in expert mode right now, which just puts more information on the screen at once. It is not really expert when you think, oh, it's going to take so much more skill. No, it just puts more information on the screen at a time. So if you want to do that. And over here, 4096 is the amount of RAM we're going to put. So that's 4 gig, 4096. So we're going to choose Create. When we choose Create, it says, hey, you want to create a drive called Unix Web 01 at 16 gig? No, don't want to use 16 gig. I want to make it 48 gig. Notice dynamically allocated is already checked, and a VDI is already checked. I never need to change those when I'm doing this and just changing the size. That is automatic. So choose Create, and there I go. Now I've created this machine. It's got 4 gig. It came with a single CPU automatically. If we go into it, go to Settings. Inside of Settings, go to System, Processor, and it defined a single CPU by default. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that like that. The network we will change later on, but right now we don't need to. So there we go. We've created our first machine now, that Unix Web 01. Now I'm going to go ahead and create our Linux Web 01. So hit New, and we'll create the LNX Web 01. And type is Linux 4096. Oh, actually the type is going to be Linux Ubuntu. I don't think they have Mint in here. Mint's based directly off Ubuntu anyway, so there we go. We'll do Ubuntu 64. Okay, there we go. Go back over, 4096, and all that looks right. Create, 10 gig drive, no, 48 gig, everything's the same. Create, and bada bing, there we go. Now in real life, you could go through and duplicate the machines you already had or something of that sort, but in order to get practice creating virtual machines, we're going to walk through each step of this, and on the quiz, you'll be graded on your ability to kind of pull these things together there. So last machine, new, we're going to go ahead and create this. It's going to be a Win, and it is Web 01, WinWeb 01. It's Microsoft Windows. We're going to choose a 2003 32-bit. So it was kind of unusual to have a 64-bit 2003 back in the day. So we'll do 2003 32-bit, and we'll give it over here on the RAM. We're going to give it 4096 which is going to be insane for a 2003 server. But there you go. Keeping everything consistent, keeping it very easy and straightforward. So create over here. We'll go over and make that 48 gig and create. So there we go. We have our 32-bit Windows box and our 64-bit Unix and Linux box. Now you would go through, pop into your settings, go to storage, and select the FreeBSD image so you can install FreeBSD on there. And you install FreeBSD, you install Linux, and then you install Windows. And I'm not really going to walk through that portion. I'll go ahead and build those out, and then we'll come right back. I should mention that the ISO files are actually over on the vault. So if you are part of this class, then the ISO files are over in the vault. If you are just watching this video and you want to go download these yourself, these are free, so you can go download those images, and you should be able to get a version of Windows for free, temporary, if nothing else. That will give you a 180-day trial, and you can try that out as well. So we're going to keep moving on there and install these machines, and after we're done installing machines, we'll come back and start our user operations. To be a little more specific for those of you who are looking at this in class, that's under disk images and then ISO. So disk images ISO over in the vault. So really fast, going through the install here, I've got my Unix box right here. I'm going to choose install, click in the window, and just press enter, and the install should run off. So it should work right there. Over here we got Linux Mint. You can right click that, choose open, or you can double click it and start the install there. Over on Windows, you can go through and press enter. It will find your empty drive. You hit F8 that you agree. You hit enter to install on your blank disk, and choose the quick format. You don't need to wait for the full format. So right there. And that will start that process. Now press right control to get your mouse back so you can click around on the windows. Now, one thing is I do not install the multimedia codecs during the install process. It just makes the install process longer, and we won't need them. So it's just one of those things that we really don't need to go through and worry about in this class. For the username and password for all of these systems, we're going to create a student user. So student user, the name of the machine is going to be workstation. Student is the username, and password is the password. On the Mint, you can go ahead and choose login automatically. On the Windows side, if you can see Windows up here, it's asking for regional language options. In this case, this full name and name of your company organization, you just put user and organization. And this is not your username, so we'll just put information there like user and organization. Per server, 9999 on the licensing. Next, computer name is workstation. I'm sorry, what am I thinking? This is WinWeb01. The administrator password is password, which you can leave that blank if you want to in the future. Right now, let's go ahead and do password. So WinWeb01. This Linux box over there, it is going to be, very sure, what is this? Yes, password's great. All that time right there, whatever time it says, I don't care, so that's fine. Over in the Linux box, we will have to change the name over there to LNX Web 01. but that's okay. That's part of our um, the class operations, so that'll be a piece of cake. On the FreeBSD machine, it's safest to not specify a name there. So if you don't specify a name, that actually sets you off to the best start on the FreeBSD machine, strangely enough. On the Windows machine, typical settings for networking works just fine. Workgroup is great, and letting it run through that installation will just take a second. And as we've seen before with the BSD box, it's almost just okay as you run through the installation. Nothing really to select there. Auto UFS on the disk. DOS partitioning is absolutely fine, so it's not a big issue at all because we're only doing a 48 gig drive. Now, we have done these installations several times, and if you want to go look on my playlist for virtual machine installations or installing the operating systems, you can go look at that. In this case, we just need to make sure we have a single CPU, 4 gig of RAM, that we are giving a student user. Now, the student user is only significant once we start the lesson, except on Linux Mint. And on Linux Mint, it wants a user object to start the system. So in Linux Mint, we do need to specify student to start with. On the other systems, we can wait. So we can just do root on FreeBSD and no name on FreeBSD. And then on Windows, it's administrator, and we'll just let it be administrator, and we'll create a user inside of Windows after that boots up. So we've got these 3 machines. Hopefully they'll finish pretty soon, and then we can shell into them and start our actual assignment for today. One note on the FreeBSD box, don't change any of the DNS settings. Just let the DNS settings be as they were, which is like a 10.0.2.3. No search, nothing else. Just leave them just blank as they are. Right here, we are not going to install users to the installed system at this point. We will be doing that as part of the class exercise. As part of the final operation, you can add workstation over here. So you can go over and add the word workstation to Etsy hosts. So we can go over and choose yes on this option right here for the FreeBSD installer. And you could select workstation on that one. But right now, because we left it blank, we're going to leave that alone, and we'll do that after the install is finished. Don't forget on the reboot, when you're going through and rebooting FreeBSD especially, or Linux, when you're rebooting those machines, go through and remove the disk from the virtual drive. You don't want your optical drive or that CD-ROM to come up on your system. So you choose restart, it's going to say remove the media, it's going to eject that thing, and it's going to go on. Now when you do that, because this started to boot from the CD-ROM, let me go over here, optical drive, so we're going to remove the disk. And I'm going to cancel just for a second, because I think it's going to say remove it right here. There we go. Remove, press enter. I'm going to press enter and then remove. And go over here and choose unmount. Okay, good. It removed it automatically. Really nice feature. Okay, over Windows, we're not going to remove that just yet because Windows still has some things that it might want to install. So you've got this Control-Alt-Delete to log in. In that case, you're going to need to go to Input, Keyboard, Insert, Control-Alt-Delete, and that will allow you to type the password, and it will log you in. Now, you'll notice the FreeBSD box right here stalled, so I'm going to hit Control-R on the Unix Web 01 and choose Reset, and that will let us get that box back up and running because I removed the CD-ROM while it was trying to read it. You know, not generally a good idea, but it doesn't really matter for what we're doing right there. It's just part of the installation. All right, so we've got our Windows machine running here, and we've got our Linux Mint machine starting up right there, and we have our FreeBSD machine starting up right here. So once these get started, we'll start the class portion. We'll start inspecting machines, and we're going to run through a Unix, Linux, and a Windows inspection for this lab. Okay, we're almost installed. So over there it says, hey, you want to launch a driver manager? I don't know. Sure, go ahead. Over here, password there. Let that go. I'm going to switch to traditional layout, which will take just a second. Over here, it's got the, hey, R2 setup wizard. We're going to choose next and let it do its thing. So next. Let it run through that. And that's just because it's Windows Server 2003 R2. That's installing right now. Now we're using Server 2003 because in the future we'll create several of these machines and they use very little RAM. You can run these on 64 meg of RAM without any problem. And if you're running on 128 meg of RAM, you can't even use all the RAM. It's just amazing. So over here we've got these options. Do you want to do any updates, etc.? Update, configure automatic. No, we're going to just choose finish. Yes, we want to close that page. When this page comes up, we'll scroll to the bottom. We'll say don't display this anymore. We will be using command line in here. And we'll choose close to get rid of that window. Now on our desktop, there are a couple of options. You can arrange your icons here and choose auto arrange. And that will auto arrange your icons. Another option is we'll click on start, go to properties. Inside of properties, we'll choose a classic start menu, customize, display log off, display administrative tools, and uncheck use personalized menus. Okay. Then inside of that, on the taskbar, you've got a couple of options that you can choose if you want any of those. We do want quick launch, and we do not want to hide inactive icons. So let's go ahead and choose OK on that. So now you can see our desktop's much more full than it was before. And we have those options. Okay, over here it said, oh, we ran a driver manager and I couldn't find any additional drivers. Looks like we are now running the traditional desktop. So if we go over here and start this and start another one. It looks like modern desktop actually, because we can't specify that without hovering. Yeah, that stinks. We don't want the modern desktop. Let's choose traditional and see if that will accept it this time. Then over in our FreeBSD box, we can go ahead and log in as root with the password of password. Now remember, on the Unix and Linux systems, the password will not be echoed to the screen. So now we're in. You can look at the ifconfig. We all have the same IP address, so we cannot see each other. That's 10.02.15. If we go over to the Windows box, and on the Windows box, we pop into start, run, and then type cmd, cd / enter, and then type ipconfig. You'll see that we're at 10.02.15. And then over in the Linux box over here, close that crazy window there. Over here, we'll go ahead and do an ifconfig and press enter. And you'll see that we're 10.02.15. So we have 10.02.15, 10.02.15, and 10.02.15. That's fine for now. They cannot see each other. We can see them. And of course, you can do all your operations inside of them. So this is where we want to be. And now we're going to start our exercises for going through listing directories, changing directories, determining what your current directory is, making directories, and removing directories. And that's about all we're going to do for the directory portion just right now. After that, we're going to go through our user section, and we're going to create users and add the users to groups. So we're going to start this off inside of Windows. So I'm going to take this Windows machine here, and in order to make this look nice, it would be nice if we would go through and install the guest edition CD image. And that's a good idea for all of your machines except for the FreeBSD machine. You want to install those guest images. So over here, I'm going to type exit. I selected insert guest editions. Let's see if it's in there. It's in there. And it's going to spin up in just a second. So we'll just give that a second. Over here, I'm going to type exit. Don't show this dialog at system startup. We're going to close this. Of course, these steps aren't necessary. This is just some tidying up that if you want to do it, please do it. It's just going to make your life easier. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do these steps. And I'm going to choose insert the guest edition again inside of Linux. Yes, run. And what's my password, which is password. And it's going to run through the installation there in that. Now, Windows, I'm going to double click this and then double click Drive D and run through the installation there. Next, next, install. It'll ask you a few times, are you sure you want to do this? Yes. Continue anyway. Continue anyway. File progress. Now I've got a pretty slow drive, so I'm working on a very slow drive at this point, so it's going to take a little extra time. The Linux box is almost done over here. Of course, the FreeBSD box, we're not installing the tools, so that's not an issue. All right, Linux box is done. At this point, I'm going to right-click, go down to the very bottom and choose Eject. And we can make this a little bit larger, so I can drag this over, and now I can make this a little bit bigger, and you can see it fits the screen. And I'm going to do that actually for the whole screen, and when I switch between the machines, you'll just see me switch between machines. So I'm going to hit this in the corner and make that fit the whole screen there. Now when I pop over to the Windows machine, if it will finish, I'll say continue anyway. Reboot now. Yes, of course, reboot. And once the Windows machine reboots, then we'll be able to drag it to the full screen as well. Now over in the Linux machine, I'm going to hit Terminal. Inside the terminal, I'm going to make this a little bit different. So I'm going to choose Edit, Preferences, go over to the custom font, make it maybe a 13. Should make it easier for everybody to see. The colors, I'm going to go through and choose green on black, and I'm going to take away the transparency. Okay. Now I've got this, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger by hitting Control-Shift plus plus, and now we've got a larger window here inside the Linux box. Drag that over a little bit. So now hopefully you can see more clearly what's going on in that Linux box. Now if I go over here to the Windows box, it's ready. So you hit a Control-Alt-Insert to kind of pop into that box, or you can go to Input and hit Keyboard Control-Alt-Delete. Okay, we got the Windows box there. Now I'm going to slam that up in the upper corner and let it fill up the screen. Go over to Start, Run, do that CMD. Now you can do cmd.exe, and that avoids a problem where you can have a malicious CMD file on your system. I'm going to go to Properties here. I'm going to have to make this it's a little different for Windows, making it a larger. One thing I want to do is add Quick Edit Mode. The Quick Edit Mode is a huge plus, so having that is great. Then go over to Layout, and on the width there, I'm going to change that, the buffer size and the window size. But on the width, let's go over and make that 128, and height, we'll just make that about 50, and I'll see what that looks like. Save the properties and go OK. So now we have a bigger window here. I can increase, now notice I'm clicking on the blue portion here to go to Properties. I can increase the size of the font too, to make the font a little bit larger, and maybe that'll be able to save the properties there. Maybe it'll be a little easier for everybody to see. So there we go. So we have the Windows box, we have the Linux box, and over here on the Unix box, I can slam that, but it's only going to take up this much room. So on the Unix box, I'm going to go to View, over into my virtual screen. I'm going to increase that to about 200%. So that you can see the Unix box there. So let's get started. Or let's not get started. I see my video is already about 24 minutes here. So at 24 minutes, that's getting a bit long. So let me go ahead and stop this video. And then I'm going to resume right on the Windows screen here. And on the Windows screen, we're going to go through and look at our computer. And so that's going to be the next video. Will be the file and directory operations. So we're going to look at file and directory operations on these machines when we come back.